Medical education is slow to embrace research from other disciplines, which has led to problematic themes appearing in obstetrics publications as recently as 2024 and 2025. A number of articles cite research stating that human pelvic variation is rooted in race and that race can impact one's suitability for vaginal birth due to pelvic morphology. The most famous of these studies was done in the 1930s by doctors Caldwell and Malloy, and they came up with 4 pelvic typologies, which you see in the center of the screen, that were mainly used to describe the differences between black and white women's pelvises. Despite dissenting research from the fields of biological anthropology, nursing, and midwifery, medical textbooks continue to use these racist concepts in teachings on pelvic anatomy and birthing, which I argue can lead to implicit bias and obstetrical violence in medicine. I wanted to study this, so I asked the following research questions. How do anatomy professors contextualize pelvic typologies in their classes? And how frequently do textbooks used in medical schools reference racist pelvic typologies? To go about this study, I used 2 methods: qualitative interviews and quantitative textbook analyses. For my interviews, I spoke to 4 people who were all instructors at U.S. medical schools in anatomy. These interviews were scripted, they lasted 20 to 45 minutes, and I transcribed them later to code them for common themes. I spoke to these professors about their knowledge of pelvic typologies, their anthropological background, and also how they selected teaching materials for their courses. For my textbook analysis, I looked at anatomy textbooks and searched for references to pelvic typologies, the use of race as a factor in birthing success, and other related concepts like manual and clinical pelvimetry. What I found was that everyone I spoke to had a PhD in bioanthropology, and they were all aware of the Caldwell-Malloy pelvic typologies and of their racist histories. Everybody excluded the typologies in their lectures, and they also did not choose to assign textbook readings either because they didn't think students would read or because their departments told them that they did not need to. However, they all found it very difficult to introduce any non-basic evolutionary anthropology concepts in their lectures because of the pacing of their courses and of medical school in general, because they all stated their students just were focused on memorizing anatomy and then passing their class and leaving. They were unsure whether or not clinical instructors used these concepts or reinforced what they taught because they did not have a direct connection to the people in charge of the clinical instructor's curricula. For my textbook findings, I found that 2/3 of the books I looked at did mention the Caldwell-Malloy typologies, but they mentioned it to varying degrees. Whether or not they talked about race or manual pelvimetry, it would depend on the authors of the textbooks. Even though I found from the instructors' interviews that people were not including these concepts in their lectures, I do think it's worth noting that in a study done last year, up to 80% of medical students were found to find things like ChatGPT and other generative AI tools to be useful studying materials. And when I went ahead and prompted it for information about pelvic morphology and birthing success and race, it did immediately bring up these typologies. Ultimately, I think that more information needs to be sought out about this topic because there does appear to be a gap in what is present in the literature and what is present in the classrooms.